The look on my son David's face when he realized the for sale sign he'd planted in my front yard was nothing more than a piece of scrap metal. I'll carry that memory to my grave. He stood there on my porch, clutching a clipboard like he already owned the place, while my daughter Sarah avoided my eyes, probably already spending her half of the $800,000 in her head. They thought they'd finally cornered the old man and forced me into a luxury care facility. But what they didn't realize was that I'd been 3 steps ahead of them for months. To understand how I managed to lock my own children out of their inheritance for the next half-century, you have to understand the moment I realized I wasn't a father to them anymore. I was just a line item on a balance sheet. I've lived in this house in the Oak Creek neighborhood for 38 years. I didn't just buy it, I built parts of it with my own 2 hands. I remember the sweat of the July heat when I was laying the foundation for the back deck, and the way the sawdust felt in my lungs when I was finishing the oak crown molding in the dining room. I was a civil engineer for the county for 4 decades. I'm a man of blueprints, measurements, and long-term stability. I worked double shifts during the recession of the 90s to make sure David and Sarah never knew what it felt like to have a late mortgage payment or a thin Christmas. I put them both through college, debt-free. I paid for Sarah's wedding to that man-child Mark, and I gave David the seed money for 3 different business ventures that all went belly up because he has the work ethic of a pampered house cat. I thought I was building a foundation for them. I thought I was teaching them that family takes care of its own. But the first crack in that foundation appeared about 3 years ago, shortly after my wife, Martha, passed away. It started small. David would come over, not to check on me, but to walk around the yard and comment on how much untapped equity was sitting in the soil. Sarah would visit, and instead of asking how my heart was doing, she'd ask if I'd updated my will lately because it's important to be organized, Dad. I didn't want to see it. I told myself they were just looking out for me. But then came the Thanksgiving dinner at Sarah's house last year. That dinner should have been my wake-up call, but I stayed quiet, watching from the periphery. I was sitting in the living room, and they thought I was napping in the recliner. I heard Mark, my son-in-law, whispering to David in the kitchen. He said, if he stays in that house another 5 years, the maintenance alone is going to eat $50,000 of our payout. We need to move him while the market is peaked. $800,000, David. Think about what that does for your debt and my Porsche. David didn't defend me. He didn't say, that's my father's home. He just sighed and said, I know, we just have to find a way to make him think it's his idea, or prove he's not capable of staying there alone. I sat there, my eyes closed, feeling the blood turn to ice in my veins. They weren't waiting for me to die. They were actively rooting for my decline so they could liquidate my life. Something shifted in me that afternoon. I didn't say a word during dinner. I even complimented Sarah on the turkey. But the next Monday morning, I didn't go to the hardware store like I usually do. I went to see an old friend of mine, a real estate attorney named Miller, who specializes in high-end trusts. If that had been the end of it, maybe I wouldn't have gone as far as I did. But then came the incident in January. I'd slipped on a patch of black ice on my driveway. Nothing serious, just a bruised hip. But David and Sarah pounced on it like vultures. They didn't bring soup, they brought brochures. Brochures for The Cedars, a senior living facility 40 miles away that looked more like a polished prison.
Dad, Sarah said, her voice dripping with that fake patronizing sweetness. You're 72. This house is too big for you. It's dangerous. We've already talked to a realtor, just to see what the market looks like. You're sitting on a gold mine, and you could live like a king at the Cedars. David chimed in, leaning against my handcrafted mantelpiece. We're just worried, Pop. And honestly, the money from the sale, it would help us help you. We could set up a managed account. We'd take care of everything. I looked at them. Really looked at them. They didn't see the man who'd stayed up all night helping them with science projects. They didn't see the man who'd grieved their mother in these hallways. They saw a check for $800,000. I'll think about it, I said. My voice was calm, methodical. What they didn't know was that I'd already started making calls. I'd spent the last 2 months getting everything in order with Miller. I knew David was in deep with some bad investments, and Mark was facing a lawsuit at his firm. They were desperate, and desperate people are dangerous. I knew if I didn't act, they'd eventually try to petition for conservatorship. So I made my move. I didn't sell the house to a developer. I didn't put it on the open market. Instead, I established the Evergreen Legacy Trust. It's a private, irrevocable land trust with a very specific set of bylaws. I sold the property to the trust for the sum of $1. The trust is managed by an independent third-party firm in another state. According to the charter I wrote, I have a lifetime tenancy. I can live there until the day I take my last breath, and the trust covers the taxes and insurance. But here was the kicker, the part that would really sting. The trust is locked. The property cannot be sold, subdivided, or leveraged for a period of 50 years. Any heirs named in my will have no claim to the physical property or its value until that 50-year clock runs out. By then, David and Sarah will be in their 80s or long gone. The money they were counting on, the $800,000 equity, was effectively vaporized. It was gone, shielded by a legal fortress they couldn't even begin to crack. I spent the next few months playing the part of the frail, undecided old man. I let them take me to tour the Cedars. I let them bring over their realtor, a shark of a woman named Brenda, who started measuring my master bedroom for staging while I was still standing in it. I watched David's eyes light up when Brenda confirmed the $800,000 valuation. "It'll sell in a weekend," she whispered to them. I heard it. I was meant to hear it. The reckoning happened on a Saturday in April. They didn't even wait for me to agree. They showed up with a moving truck and a care coordinator from the facility. David had a box in his hands, ready to start packing my kitchen. "Today's the day, Pop," David said, his voice brimming with a forced, manic energy. "We've got the deposit down at the Cedars. We've even got a buyer lined up for the house, an all-cash offer. We just need you to sign the listing agreement and the transfer papers." I was sitting at the dining room table, the one I'd polished every year for 3 decades. I had a glass of iced tea and a single manila folder in front of me. Sarah was already in the hallway, taking pictures of my mother's antique clock. "Sit down, both of you," I said. I didn't yell. I didn't have to. There was something in my tone, the old engineer coming out, that made them freeze. David dropped the box. Sarah came back into the room, her brow furrowed. "Dad, we don't have time for this," she said. "The movers are on the clock. The movers can wait," I replied. I opened the folder. "I've been doing some thinking about the house, about the untapped equity you both are so concerned with." David smirked, thinking he'd won. "We knew you'd see sense. It's for the best, really."
I agree, I said. It is for the best. That's why I sold the house 3 months ago. The silence that hit the room was deafening. David's smirk didn't just fade, it disintegrated. Sarah's jaw actually dropped. You sold it?" David stammered. "To who? We didn't see a sign, we didn't see a listing. Where's the money, Dad? Where's the $800,000? "There is no $800,000, I said, sliding a copy of the trust agreement across the table. "The house is now the property of the Evergreen Legacy Trust. I sold it for $1. I have a lifetime lease, and per the trust's ironclad bylaws, the property cannot be sold or liquidated for 50 years. It's been preserved as a family heritage site." David grabbed the papers, his hands shaking. He flipped through them, his face turning a deep, sickly shade of red. This can't be legal. You can't just give away the house. That's our inheritance." "It was never your inheritance, David," I said, my voice as steady as a rock. "It was my home. I built it. I paid for it. And I've decided that if you both love the idea of this house so much, you can wait until you're 85 to see a dime from it. Of course, by then, the inflation will have made that $800,000 look like pocket change, but that's the beauty of long-term planning." Sarah started to cry, not out of sadness, but out of pure, unadulterated rage. "How could you do this to us? We have bills. Mark has that legal trouble, and David's business is struggling. We were counting on this." "I know you were," I said. "That was the problem. You stopped seeing me as your father and started seeing me as a bridge to a payday. You were willing to pack me off to a fluorescent lit room 40 miles away just so you could clear your credit cards. You didn't care if I was happy. You didn't care if I was comfortable. You just wanted the walls and the roof turned into cash." David slammed his fist on the table. "I'll sue. I'll have you declared incompetent. You sold $1 million asset for $1. That's proof right there that you've lost it." At that moment, the front door opened. Miller, my attorney, walked in. He's a big man with a briefcase that looks like it's made of dragon skin and a look of professional boredom that can wither a person at 50 paces. "Actually, David," Miller said, stepping into the dining room, "we had your father evaluated by 3 independent physicians before the trust was finalized. He passed with flying colors. We also have video recordings of your conversations regarding his decline, which clearly show a predatory intent to liquidate his assets for your own personal gain. If you try to challenge this trust, I will not only defeat you in court, I will countersue for elder abuse and legal fees. And trust me, the trust has a much larger legal fund than you do." The care coordinator David had hired slipped out the front door without saying a word. The moving truck engine killed out in the driveway. The room felt very small, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. David looked at me, his eyes full of a hateful desperation. You're really going to do this? You're going to stay here all alone in this big house, knowing your kids are struggling? I'm not alone, I said. I have my memories. I have my dignity, and I have the peace of knowing that no one is going to sell the floorboards out from under me while I'm sleeping. As for your struggles, you're both in your 40s. I think it's about time you learned how to build your own foundation instead of trying to tear down mine. They left that afternoon. They didn't take any boxes with them, but they took their greed and their entitlement. Sarah tried to call me a week later crying about a car payment, but I didn't answer. I sent her a link to a budgeting app and told her I'd see her at Christmas if she could learn to talk about something other than money.
David hasn't spoken to me since. I hear he's working a regular job now, actually putting in 40 hours a week for the first time in his life. Mark had to sell the Porsche. As for me, I'm sitting on my back deck right now. The sun is setting over the trees I planted when Sarah was just a toddler. The house is quiet, but it's a good kind of quiet. It's the sound of a life well lived and a legacy protected. My son calls every few weeks now, his voice much humbler than it used to be. He asks about my health. He asks if I need help with the gardening. He knows there's no payday coming, not for a long, long time. Funny how that works. When the money disappears, only the family is left. And I've finally figured out which parts of this family are worth keeping.